Welcome to the What If podcast. My name is Nontsegele Lonzula. If you're joining us for the first time, I'm joined here by Tendai Marisa. Tendai, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I am keen to continue our discussion. This is part 2 of a conversation that we started in a previous episode where we are talking about one of your articles called Africa's Path. And honestly, when I read it at 2 a.m. to try and catch up. It was just incredible, the amount of information that is there around Africa as a continent. And in our previous conversation, we spoke about 3 areas that Africa, I don't want to say is good at, or where we kind of have an advantage, right? And the first one was around agriculture. The second was mining. We also looked at manufacturing. And then our population as it is an advantage for us.
Yeah.
Okay. And then as we closed off the debate, we were talking about Africa taking an entrepreneurial stance as a continent in order for us to move forward with our development agenda. So let's come back to that.
Yeah.
And maybe you can just take us through your closing remarks from the previous one around entrepreneurship.
Okay, so if I recall very well, it was around an entrepreneurial stance that stems from deliberate government efforts. Because at times you feel like Africa's entrepreneurs, their first line of resistance is their governments, that they're struggling to get permits, to get licenses, or even to get government contracts. So it's like, it's a huge uphill struggle. We don't make it easy for entrepreneurs. And one of the reasons why it's like that is because the people who are in government don't understand the battles of entrepreneurship. So when you begin to have maybe people who have a bit of sympathy and understanding of what it takes to build an entrepreneurial venture in government, then working alongside the practitioners, I think for me, that's one of the things that we really have to consider. But related to that is the issue that the policy making has to sort of shift from this extroverted stance where you are looking outside for the Messiah, but begin to look at your own people as the different messiahs, the little messiahs that can help in different sectors, etc. Once we've taken that, because I think it has to do with African pride. When you begin to really be proud of your own people, proud of ventures that are coming out of Africa, begin to pour money and resources and support to those ventures. Because in many instances, African entrepreneurs are called by all sorts of derogatory terms. Yeah, they are looked down upon, they are seen as corrupt, they're seen as all this. Yet anyone who comes from outside of Africa is seen as the investor, is seen as the big boy, is the bwana, is everything. So I think I think the shift needs to start with our mindsets.
I need us to clarify the type of entrepreneur that we're talking about, because I could be selling airtime and I'm also considered an entrepreneur of sorts. So just let's go back to the definition we used in our previous episode. What type of entrepreneur are you referring to? So
if you look at South Korea, for instance, South Korea was very deliberate around building certain families, the Daewoo's, the Hyundai's, Samsung, etc. And they put money in there. These started off as, at the beginning, they were insignificant brands. But if you look at now, they are now global brands.
Right.
But if you really listen to what they will be saying, all of them give credit to the South Korean government for the work that they've done. So we're not talking about, it would be good to support somebody selling airtime, but we're talking about a youngster saying, I can develop a smartphone. I have the technology. I know what I'm talking about. All I need is maybe permits to import things at no tariff. Then I can build. Because you will notice that in Africa right now, we don't have a mobile phone made out of Africa. Not a single one. We don't have a laptop made in Africa. Not a single one. I can list the things that we don't have. We don't have smartwatches that are made out of Africa. And yet the technology, when you really read around it, is nothing amazing.
So we're looking at innovative entrepreneurs.
We're looking at producers of goods, not traders. We're looking at people who can produce goods from 0 to 1. People who can look at a piece of land and say, I can establish a plant to assemble something. Those are the entrepreneurs that we're needing. So I keep on making reference to people who can play at what we call the commanding heights of the economy. People who have dreams and visions where they can employ 500, 1,000 people. Because that's what Africa needs.
Right.
People who can create jobs.
I see that. So let's talk about the informal sector in Africa. I'm Zimbabwean, so I will look at that and say, from stats, it seems 80 to 90% of the youth are unemployed. I stand to be corrected by you. So when we are talking about development, and we said that our population is one of the advantages that we have, what does that path look like?
So in many instances, what we call informal sector is in many other regions called the cottage industry. We call them informal because, number one, we have not created a pathway for them for registration, Africa's path, the pathway of formalization, the pathway of securing money to scale their trade, the pathway for them to secure a premise to work. So we keep them in a place of informality deliberately because we've not understood. So if we understand, like you're rightly saying, that the majority of our youths, I would say the majority of families in countries like Zimbabwe, because Zimbabwe at some point had the highest informal sector level of employment.
Right.
That there were more people employed in the informal sector compared to those employed in the formal sector. But then you begin to ask, because half the time when these discussions happen, they're happening from a tax perspective. People are just looking and say, how do we get the tax dollars from there? But you're not looking at the root to say, how do we bring these people to a place of dignity where they're not being harassed by cops, they're not being charged punitive tax rates when they import their goods, etc. What kind of mechanisms can you put in place? So many countries are coming up with this ease of doing business. Then they do the investment agencies, etc. If you look at all those, they're mostly looking at foreigners. We do not have a one-stop shop for SMEs to say, if you want to register an SME, we are cancelling all the costs, just come and register, prove to us that you're actually an SME by revenue that you are earning. Then you make sure, even banks are not the most friendly. They are hostile to the informal sector. They don't give them facilities, they don't give them credit, and yet they want their bank accounts. And the bank accounts that are charged to these entities usually have higher costs in terms of charges. So I think for us, what we are calling the informal sector can, within 2-3 years, can actually become a bigger formal sector if we put the right measures in place.
All right, so how does this informal sector feed into the 3 areas that we spoke about? And what do you foresee? Or what do you think a path would be if we're looking at our agriculture, manufacturing, is it mining? How can that feed into the development of Africa?
So let's start with agriculture. Please remind me to come back to mining. But with agriculture, the producers themselves, like I said earlier, they're smallholders. But the producers themselves are mostly seen as they're not registered, so they are part of the informal sector. Yeah. So because they don't have title to their land, they're not recognized as business people. That's one. Yeah. Then number two, the people who buy the goods from these producers are sort of middlemen. There's a Shona term, which let me hazard to use it. It's makoronyera. Okay. Yeah. They're middlemen. They're also informal. Then the markets where goods are traded, millions move at these markets, but we dare call it informal sector. Mbare Musika, in the heart of Harare, I think earlier estimates were like a week, $1 million is exchanged at Mbare Musika. Yeah,
and that's our informal economy.
But we call it informal. No, it's informal. So we don't recognize all those places. We don't give them. We don't recognize them from policy. We don't acknowledge them. We don't give them permits, proper permits. At times when they are selling their wares in certain places, we arrest them, etc. And we do not even give them friendly finance to scale. So that's one. Then number two, with agriculture, the people who are producing small machinery, etc., that is needed on the farms are also in those spaces. So there's a huge cottage industry that is engaged in manufacturing low technology goods, etc. But they are also called informal sector.
Right.
So you see there are layers around it to an extent that if you were to measure it properly and bring it to the formal circuits, you actually begin to say that you can, if I was a politician, I could deal with unemployment quicker.
Okay. That sounds like a fair point.
Yeah.
So as we are talking about all of this, there's one elephant in the room that I think we definitely need to touch on, and that's AI. Yeah. And its role in Africa's path. What role do you think it plays?
So I think much has been said about AI, and I think there's it's overly simplistic and optimistic about AI. So let's start off by AI is internet-based.
Yes.
Yeah. You need to have access to reliable internet for you to actually work any solution.
And electricity.
Yeah, so I'll come back to that. So, but for you, before you even get to internet, you need energy. Yeah, you need reliable energy. Our energy in Africa, and Africa faces a huge energy deficit. So many of our otherwise would be brilliant innovators coming from low-income areas spend days without electricity. When they have it, it's intermittent. That's one. The cost of data in Africa is probably the highest globally. So how do you get people who all they have is brilliant ideas to come and innovate? So as we speak in 2025, I stand corrected, but there's no single AI solution coming from Africa. No single AI solution coming from Africa. Everything that we're doing, we are importing. So before we even jump into AI, I always say to people, we are spending a lot of money on software that is manufactured elsewhere. The amount of money we spend on basic software like Microsoft best programs, Google best programs, the amount of money that African businesses, governments, etc., pay towards Microsoft, pay towards SAP, towards many other software producers. If we were focused first, before we jump to AI, on just doing financial management software that works for our SMEs, for our companies, etc., we would reduce the dollars that we're using to import to pay for these services. So these are all legal. There's nothing illegal about it. But we are consumers of software produced elsewhere. So for me, I always say to people, yes, I hear you, the fascination around AI, you're seeing ChatGPT, you're seeing all this DeepSeek, etc. Then you think that's the next wave. But you are trying to get to AI before you have even done software. So we have very limited scalable software that has got African origin that is being used in enterprises. So if we're to invest, at least invest in saying, how do we reduce our dependence on multinational companies that are the monopolies that companies like Microsoft have? This is a market that is unchallenged. There's nothing challenging them. Everyone wants to be a client of Microsoft. Everyone is looking at ways of paying for this. So we are moving money from Africa into San Francisco, into Silicon Valley, which is San Francisco, Microsoft, which is in Washington, Seattle, and many others. What are we doing? So we're now saying, oh, now there's AI. Let's jump that. Yet, if you look at, I was explaining to somebody who said that if you look at African mobile telephone companies, one of their challenges is actually billing softwares. Because most of the times they actually pay for billing software coming from India. So you find a telephone company, mobile telephone company, setting up, but it does not have an innovation hub. Yeah? Where it's encouraging people to develop innovations that can help its business. So outside of the Please Call Me contest around Vodacom, we've not yet seen another one. You know what I mean? So I think the AI conversation, while it is healthy and necessary, we are not even yet there. We don't have enough energy, we don't have enough infrastructure. But why don't we focus on software? Because we're spending a lot of money on software. If we're to reduce our exposure in terms of imported software, even our governments, they use imported software. Many government departments are using software that is imported.
I guess my challenge, as you're talking around that, is, I guess we're always playing the catch-up game in whatever element it is. Whether it be, you spoke about phones. I'm like, by the time you're trying to make a phone, someone's already got a smartphone, or they already got like a screen that comes from your glasses. So for you to kind of come back and then be like, I think it's a difficult thing for us to do. I don't have the answers for it, but people are so far ahead that even now trying to catch up, if we had to kind of scale back and fix the small things, it's like we're so far behind that I don't know what that looks like. But I'm not downplaying anything that you said. It's just my thinking is like, how do we catch up and then also make sure that we are ahead of the wave, if that's ever going to be possible for us?
Yeah, unfortunately, with technology, it's going to take a lot of time for us to be ahead of the wave. There are other avenues where we can pursue, where we're already ahead of the wave, where people are coming to us, especially around our organic foods, etc., etc. But coming back to this technology question, I don't think, China did not try to be ahead of the wave on day one. China spent time, took a humble posture, started learning, pirating, and doing all sorts of things, until where now China can leap over other countries in terms of what they've done. So for me, I always say there's a lot that we can learn from China Yeah, 20 years ago, China was not where it is today. There's a remarkable difference of the China of 20 years ago and today.
Yeah.
But in Africa, there's no difference. You know what I mean?
That we're not doing the deep work? Is it that we are kind of surface and wanting to jump over?
Yeah, but we need ecosystems. Our African governments, like I said, an entrepreneurial state would understand that to say the future is solar-powered vehicles. Yeah? Then we begin to say, so how do we do it? So the first thing could be to invest in bringing in those who are already manufacturing, but put a condition that for whatever job, you have a local covering you. So by 5 years, locals have that technology. Because technology transfer is not going to happen automatically, that people just come and say, we're giving you technology. You have to be deliberate about it to say, how do we import this technology? Because at the moment, there's a lot of politicking around it, but we're not investing in it. So if we do not manufacture a laptop, a tablet, a phone, and yet we think we can do AI.
We're too far behind.
Honestly.
All right, so let's come back to Western prescriptions, which is part of the article that you talk about.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to see how, in development, when I was in school, doing my master's, you would have the theories around, Western given strategies and models that you're supposed to follow. And from what we've seen in the conversations that we've had, we've noticed that it doesn't work for us. So what do we do?
So I've said, and I was very clear, ditch Western recommendations, everything. Because we are here because of listening too much to foreigners, to outsiders. We really need to revisit what is the essence of being African? What is the essence of an African-led development strategy? There are many. So for instance, right now, we're in a place of, it's an inflection point of sorts. Two things are happening at the same time. The West has said we're reducing aid towards underdeveloped regions, including Africa. So that's what they've said. And we can see the aid levels coming down. But they've not stopped demanding for debt repayment. So debt repayments are off. So we have now become a net creditor to the world. There's more money coming out of Africa than coming into Africa. So honestly speaking, we need to renegotiate that. We understand aid you can withhold, but some of the debt that we're being made to pay is, as Patrick Bond said, it's odious debt. Debt that was borrowed maybe during colonial times, during apartheid times. That's number one. Number two, some of it we're paying the interest. The principal is done. We're still paying the interest. So we need actually to renegotiate the terms of debt, etc. To say if you're cancelling aid, is there a way of forgiving debt so that we can also, because at the moment we can't move. There's this shackle around us. But also African governments need to have some level of boldness around what they're doing. So there are governments that create surpluses. I think Algeria at some point, Botswana at some point. And when they have these surpluses, they want to take them to the IMF. We need an African bank where we can keep our surplus and begin to lend to each other. Because there's always going to be a country that is a surplus 1 year and another one that is in deficit. That's another thing. Then number two, in ditching Western prescriptions, is actually looking for alternative technology. Because what we've been told and what we've been believing on is not happening. So for a country that is rich in what we call solar energy, how come our public transport is still powered by fossil energy? What would happen if we all ditch that and we begin to adopt public transport solutions that actually harness solar energy? What would that look like? Our dependency on fossil energy, fossil fuel goes away. But also our dependence on fossil-powered vehicles that are coming mostly from the West also goes away.
Can I throw in a bone in there? I know you're still talking about the economy and like the running the transport system. Is democracy a Western prescription?
So, as I say, democracy has got African roots. This is what I believe. But to say I don't believe in, I don't talk about democracy the way everyone talks about democracy from just an elections perspective. But democracy is really about what citizens do with each other. And problem solving in communitarian spaces, etc. Even this communal tenure that I was talking about is a model of democracy. But many instances, when you guys talk about democracy, you're talking about elections. Yeah. So elections-based democracy, yes, it has a Western origin, but we've always been able to solve public problems as communities and creating consensuses around ourselves. So even that is dying, and because we've sort of accepted a certain model which puts so much responsibility and trust in an individual or one political party. And actually, in the process, we've marginalized many others. So the kind of democratic vision we should have is to say, how do we create inclusive processes of public problem solving, citizens coming together, regardless of political parties, but fixing their problems, starting at the local level up. So when you look at that kind of democracy, it has its origins from Africa and maybe Greece. But the democracy that you guys talk about when you say democracy, around elections, whatever, yeah, that model. Yeah, so do we ditch it? Somebody says, democracy is the worst form of government, but it's the best model we have today. If we can't ditch something when we don't have an alternative. So we need to develop an alternative first. Otherwise, we put ourselves into chaos.
I respect that. And I was going to say something, then I realized maybe not the best thing to say. So let's talk about regionalization. Is that still a strategy to pursue as a form of path towards development?
Yeah, so regional integration for me, I think has become again captured by political voices. We're not looking at it from creating scale. Yeah, scale of consumption, scale of replication and innovation. So let me use an example that I was talking about offline. The issue around security documents, passports, birth certificates. Many African countries do not actually have the capacity to do that, including Zimbabwe. We import things like the passport book, etc., from other countries. But what if we, as SADC, because when SADC, prior to South Africa becoming independent, that responsibility had been given to Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe, at some point in the 80s, was even printing the Botswana Pula, yeah, at Fidelity printers. So what if we revisited that and began to say, right now Malawi is struggling with a shortage of passports because foreign currency issues, etc. But what if we imported that technology and assigned one country to do that for the region? Then we assigned something. The original formulation of SADC was interesting because every country was given a responsibility. That's where this food baskets of the region comes from when you talk about Zimbabwe, because it had been assigned food security as well. So when you look at all those things, each country in the region has got something to give. And that's what we then zero on, then we let it do. So when you look at regional integration from that perspective, not only from saying common market, because people are talking about this common market thing, but you are producing nothing. So the risk is you are creating a common market for Chinese produced goods. Right. Then you lend them in South Africa, you put a made in South Africa label, then they move across the region. But when you begin to look at what does each country, because right now many countries that are afraid of regional integration is that it will come and destroy the infant industry that is there. But when you begin to allocate roles for each other, then regional integration is definitely the sure way to go.
It's the pathway. Yeah. So we're going to conclude this discussion. And I want to find out for you, as you're writing this article, what stood out for you the most?
Yeah, some of us have been doing this dance for a while. We call ourselves Pan-Africanists. We go into Pan-African platforms. We discuss this. But half the time we become articulate in dissecting the problem. There was a time when all I could talk about was illicit financial flows, etc., etc.
Oh, which is something that you actually touched on in the article. We didn't get a chance to talk about that.
I think we need to spend more time daydreaming about solutions because the challenge is vision. That's the challenge we have right now. I think the founding fathers had a vision of a free Africa. They spent time daydreaming freedom, not oppression. And they achieved that goal in terms of unshackling us from colonialism and apartheid. So I think the responsibility of this generation and those coming is to actually then unburden us of poverty. Because poverty is the characteristic that defines Africa. Whenever you hear Africa, what rings at the back of your mind is children without their tops on. Yeah, and flies all over, bad infrastructure, bad roads, accommodation infrastructure that is backward, everything that does not work. So we need to be in a place of discomfort. We cannot be comfortable when the house is burning. So we really need to say there is a cause and there's a role for all of us to play. Because in many instances, given the fact that some of us are in non-state actor places, we're also comfortable to expose how foolish our leaders are. And we end there. That's how smart we are, to expose how they are contradictory, how they're sold out, how they've captured the state. Then we end there. But I think we need to do more, because I think the challenge of Africa's transformation cannot be the burden of a single government or a single political party or a leader. It is everyone's burden to really make sure that we are moving our people from where we are right now to something better. So for me, if writing is helping, the better. But I sense that the challenge that we have is big, is going to take more than writing. It's going to take more than podcasts. It's going to take more than dialogues, but it's going to take ideas around how do we create the next 10, 20 jobs? How do we create value? How do we make sure youths have access to laptops that work so that they can innovate solutions? So if we've not done that, then we've let down a generation.
Tendai, thank you. You've put that so well.
Sure.
So if you'd like to read this article, you can find it at www.cvuinstitute.org. It's called Africa's Path. And we are not just looking at Africa's problems, but we're also suggesting a number of solutions that we could consider as citizens of Africa. My name is Nonsegelelo. I was joined by Tendai Marisa. Please do follow us on YouTube and at CVO TV, and we hope to see you again soon. Goodbye for now. To subscribe, you can look for What If We Think Differently on Spotify. You can also look for What If We Think Differently on Apple Podcasts. On YouTube, you will find us on CVO TV. To stay up to date with all our episodes, don't forget to subscribe.